Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video in my Future Story Speculation miniseries. Today, I want to talk about a return to Mondstadt and the stories we could have there after Snezhnaya. I'll be going over potential stories about Venti, Dvalin, the Harbingers, and some other ideas that I have. Now, this video does contain spoilers for the quests listed on screen now, so if you haven't done those, you have been warned. With all that said though, let's get right into the video. To start off, let's talk about the Anemo Archon Barbatos. We know him as Venti, and according to him, he is the weakest of the 7 Archons. However, I personally don't think that's true. After all, he was able to completely terraform Mondstadt, cutting the tops off mountains and flinging them out to sea so that they became Musk Reef and the Golden Apple Archipelago. Additionally, he seems to be holding a lot of different secrets. From various different sources, we know that the god of time Istaroth once resided in Mondstadt, ruling alongside the Anemo Archon. Ironically though, Istaroth was forgotten over time in this nation thanks to the aristocracy. During this time period, the Lawrence clan suppressed knowledge about Mondstadt's history and destroyed historical records and relics. The Great Fire of Fall Equinox also happened around this time, which reduced the once massive Mondstadt library to a sixth of its former size. So, if anyone were to have a good amount of information on Istaroth and her time in Mondstadt, it would be Venti. If we return to Mondstadt after Snezhnaya and get a new Archon quest with Venti, we could learn a lot about the mysterious god of time. Speaking of information, Venti could also give us some more info on both the Archon War and the Cataclysm. In the Archon War, we know that Venti assisted the people of Old Mondstadt in overthrowing Decarabian. We also know that Andreas voluntarily gave up his life so that Barbatos would become the first ever Anemo Archon. Beyond these events though, Venti wasn't very involved in the Archon War. As such, he might not be able to give much more information on that time period than he already has. As for the Cataclysm though, he may know quite a bit. When he first woke up during the Cataclysm, he and Dvalin fought against Durin above the mountain Salvandagnir, now known as Dragonspine. After Durin's defeat, Venti likely traveled to Conria with many of the other Archons. Therefore, he could give us more information about this fallen nation. Additionally, we could even travel to Dragonspine with him to investigate Durin's remains and try to find a way to use it against Celestia. Moving on though, I'd like to talk about who the Anemo Dragon Sovereign could be. While this isn't confirmed, Dvalin is very likely the current incarnation of this sovereign. He was born from a convergence of elemental energy in the high heavens, making him a dragon born of pure Anemo power. As such, he has command over sky and wind, which is shown during the Mondstadt Archon quests when he summons tempests. With all of this in mind, I think it's fair to say that Dvalin is our Anemo Sovereign. So, the Sovereign quest of Mondstadt will involve us figuring out how to fully restore his power. While the return of the Hydro Archon's power to New Valette required Focalor to sacrifice herself, I don't think this will be necessary for Venti and Dvalin. In my video where I introduced this concept of a Tefat chapter interlude, I speculated that the return of an Archon's power to a sovereign could be based around that Archon's ideal. The ideal of the Anemo Archon is freedom, so Venti may just have to free himself of his power and give it to Dvalin. In fact, he may have already partially done this towards the end of Mondstadt's Archon quest. Venti likely kept some of his power, but with the battle against Celestia approaching, he may very well freely give the rest back to Dvalin. Now, we may need to find a way to trick Celestia here so that they don't find out what's going on. For this quest, Venti and Dvalin could do a similar trick that Venti did with the Holy Lyre back in the Mondstadt Archon quests. Venti or Dvalin could use their magic to keep up the appearance of the Anemo Divine Throne, even though the Anemo Archon's power was already returned to Dvalin. Now then, let's talk about the Fatui Harbingers that we could potentially see in Harbinger quests in Mondstadt. First up, let's talk about Capitano. He has already had encounters with the Knights of Vonius in the past, back when he encountered Varga's expedition at an unknown location. While the two groups were a bit on edge about the encounter, both Capitano and Varka agreed to keep things peaceful. As such, if any Harbinger were to make a trip to Mondstadt to get help for a fight against Celestia, Capitano would definitely be the best bet. Also, if the theory about him being the Bloodstained Knight is true, he could even be from Mondstadt. Moving on to a Harbinger that also has a history with Mondstadt, let's talk about Dottore. One of his segments made an appearance in the manga, in which he slayed the beast known as Ursa the Drake and met with Diluc at Dawn Winery. However, another one of his segments may have also been in Mondstadt before this. In the manga, we briefly see a character named Eric, though we never see his face. Based on his hair color and clothing style though, he could very well have been another segment of Dottore. Still, Eric was discharged from the Knights as a traitor, so Dottore coming back might not be the best option for the Fatui. So, let's move on to the next Harbinger who can make an appearance, Columbina. As of right now, she is the most mysterious of all the Harbingers, and I do want to make a video speculating all about her. In the past though, I have speculated that she could have some connections to Istaroth. I talk more about this in my video about Istaroth, so if you want to know more, I recommend you check that out. Anyways, since Venti has connections to Istaroth as well, Columbina could be sent here to try and mend the relationship between Venti and the Tsaritsa. The two weren't on the best of terms after the Cataclysm, so sending Columbina may be the best bet here. After all, Columbina would have connections to both Archons in this case. She is a Harbinger working for the Tsaritsa, and like Venti, she very likely has connections to Istaroth. Additionally, having both Columbina and Venti together could give us even more lore about Istaroth and the connections they all have. Now, for the last Harbinger, I want to talk about Pantalone. As I said in my recent video about him, he already has made an impact in Mondstadt. He was the one who rented out the Goth Grand Hotel for the Fatui to stay in while stationed in Mondstadt. As such, he is likely very familiar with the economics of the region. He could work with the Knights to obtain and organize supplies, while also providing some additional funding to help out in other areas. Both Capitano and Pantalone could also work together to ease political relations between the two regions, as right now, the Knights aren't exactly fond of the Fatui. Of course, a return to Mondstadt wouldn't be complete without some new areas to explore. For Mondstadt, we could finally see the introduction of Dornman Port, and perhaps the Dandelion Sea as well. For those of you who don't know, Dornman Port is located to the north of Mondstadt City, and it is quite far away. It has been stated to be far from both the Nameless Island east of Mondstadt and Port Ormos in Sumeru. Port Ormos makes sense, but the Nameless Island makes it seem as though this place is very far up north. As such, it could be located at the border between Mondstadt and Snezhnaya. This could actually work in the favor of the relations between the Knights of Favonius and the Fatui. After all, since the two groups aren't on the best of terms, a neutral meeting ground could make discussions and negotiations go a lot smoother. A quest like this could also act as our introduction to Dornman Port and the surrounding area, giving us a reason to finally visit after all this time. As for the Dandelion Sea, it's currently unknown if it's a real place or just a myth. If it is a real place, we could see it introduced in the same expansion that brings us Dornman Port. A mysterious area like the Dandelion Sea could also be important to Venti, Dvalin, or even Istaroth, making it somewhere we visit during their related quests. Anyways, that's pretty much it for my ideas on future stories that take place in Mondstadt. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on topics I mentioned in this video, I recommend my videos on Dornman Port and the Dandelion Sea, Istaroth, and the aftermath of Snezhnaya. Of course, more of these types of videos will be coming soon, so I really hope you enjoy watching them. I would love to hear what ideas you all have for future stories in Mondstadt in the comments below as well. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Sources and further readings are also in the description if you want to check them out. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video.